Well, I guess we'll get going. Good morning. Welcome to the Washington Coast Restoration and Resiliency Initiative 2024 application training. I am Alyssa Farrell. I'm the program lead for WCRRI at the Recreation Conservation Office. Today I have Alice Rubin with me. She is going to be managing the chat, so she'll be looking at questions, and then let us know in the chat if you're having technical difficulties or if you're having problems hearing. We're going to record this and post it on the WCRRI webpage, so it'll be available there if you choose to look at it later. So here's kind of the agenda for the day. We're going to go over the program, look at the schedule, eligibility, an overview of the application process, and at the end, we'll give some important information for projects if they get funded. So first, I want to recognize the partners that we work with to administer this program. We have the Coast Salmon Partnership, which is the salmon recovery region, representatives from that group, the Nature Conservancy, as well as Wild Salmon Center, and the Washington Sea Grant make up our decision-making body that we call the steering committee. And these folks help us develop the application materials, the evaluation criteria, run the grant round, and essentially put together the ranked list of projects for an investment plan to submit to the legislature. So the overall mission of the program is to protect and restore ecosystems of the Washington coast while promoting the resilience of coastal communities through job creation and hazard reduction. So these are ideally just for projects along the Washington coast and in the boundaries of those marine resources committees. It began as a local effort supported by the Nature Conservancy back in 2015. And since then, it's developed into a competitive program that helps bring the best projects forward for coastal resiliency. We get about 10 to 12 million every biennium. They added resiliency in the 2019 and 2021 biennium to kind of recognize that the pressures of our coastal ecosystems facing from climate change. So that was added then. So proposals for this program in order to address the strategy should address high priority ecological protection and restoration needs. They should also foster ecological and community resilience and reduce hazards or risks. And they should also use cost-effective and process-based solutions. We want folks to also communicate the effectiveness of their actions at increasing the resiliency of the ecosystem. This program is heavily geared towards providing employment opportunities for coastal communities as well. And each project should be a standalone, focused effort with discrete metrics. So the grant schedule, this is for the 2025-2027 biennium. Draft applications are due March 14th. So there is just a small set of information we're asking for. We will do review of those and notify folks whether they're eligible to continue to apply for a final application and be involved in the site visits on March 29th. So once we know what projects we have in the door, we will start scheduling site visits. These could be in person or remote presentations online. So we'll be figuring that out as we get stuff in the door and kind of figure out what we have coming in. So once the site visits happen, you can get comments from the technical review panel. You can incorporate those, finalize your applications, and submit those by June 6th. We're going to put together the ranked draft investment plan and submit that on August 5th, and also publish it on the web. And then the effective date of this money will be July 1st, 2025. Any questions so far, Alice?
None yet.
Okay. So going through some program eligibility, these are the eligible type of applicants. We could have state and local agencies, federal agencies as well, Native American tribes, nonprofits, your quasi-governmental entities like your conservation districts and your regional fish enhancement groups, irrigation districts, and public or private corporations. And the maximum amount that you can request is $2 million. We do not require match, but you can get points up to 5 if you have match leverage. So if you're bringing in match, then it needs to be billed and has to be part of the scope. So the same rules apply for reimbursable costs. So things have to be eligible for match if they were for reimbursement, and then fall within the award period. So the different types of activities that we can fund are acquisition projects, feasibility and design. These are your planning projects, restoration, and innovative techniques, but they all must restore or protect Washington Coast ecosystems and promote resiliency and create jobs. So the general award period for this is July 1, 2025 to June 30 of 2027. That is the biennium, but we can allow additional time if necessary and approved. We can approve for certain pre-agreement costs. For acquisitions, this could be a waiver of retroactivity from RCO, which allows any purchase of property to be eligible for reimbursement or match. And this would be needed if you were going to buy the property before you get awarded money. And so we require you to submit some documentation for that, has to follow all the RCO acquisition policies. And it's good, we put it on file and attach the approval letter in the application, and it's good for 2 grant rounds for any RCO program. However, doesn't guarantee that you're going to get funding. It just makes it eligible. So for acquisitions with that, ideally costs necessary to establish land values, doing appraisals are eligible. Engineering and design costs for restoration and planning. And in some cases, we can allow purchase of actual wood, culverts, or like prefabricated bridges if it's cost effective and you receive prior approval. More on this is available in the Manual 5, which is for restoration projects, as well as the acquisition project Manual 3. But again, these all should relate to the scope of work you've identified. All right, another confusing thing is AA&E and admin costs. So basically, AA&E is administration, architectural, and engineering costs, and those are for restoration projects. We limit those to 30% of your construction costs. So admin in general covers just staff time to administer the grant, do your progress reporting, billing, things like that. And then it can also include a percentage of your engineering costs for a restoration project if you are doing that. It's meant to be limited because if you're applying for a construction project, you should really have most of your designs done. It's ideally meant if you're just doing maybe your final level of designs and then going to construction. So that's why it's limited. You're going to want to detail your budget to make sure you're breaking out the admin, like your staff time costs, as opposed to any engineering and design costs that you might need to help clarify that. And it also helps justify your budgets. For acquisition, administration is considered things like landowner negotiations, again, administering the project, doing your progress reports, drafting documents in order to prepare them for recording, basic kind of administrative things associated with acquisition that aren't land costs, or incidentals. And those are limited to 5% of your total acquisition costs. And then with planning projects, your design, your assessments, your feasibility, barrier inventory projects, all those costs are considered admin or non-capital if you're billing. So those are just incorporated into the overall costs. But we still want them clarified in your budgets. Warning, wordy slide. This is just kind of a list of all the ineligible project elements. It's in the manual. Just want to make sure you are aware of those things. We did add commercial activities to this for this round. So if you're not sure if your project activities are eligible, please talk to me and we can figure that out and go from there. Other requirements. So again, we have policies for restoration in Manual 5. All of the acquisition policies are found in Manual 3. In general, buildings must be removed for fee simple acquisitions. We require public access. These are for acquiring properties in perpetuity. For fee simple, we require RCO's deed of right. For conservation easements, we require an assignment of rights. And this basically puts an encumbrance on the property to maintain it on behalf of the state for conservation values. So if you plan on buying a property and then putting a coffee stand on part of it, make sure you're carving that out of the scope of work, of the deed of right documents, of the acquisition in general that the project will be funding. And that way we can avoid future conversions. There is a stewardship commitment for projects. It's 10 years for restoration, and it's in perpetuity for acquisition. So Manual 7 has information about those long-term obligations for these kind of commitments. And also, in general, the sponsors required for all permitting that's required for the projects. Something to get familiar with if you're doing an acquisition proposal, you're going to want to be very familiar with this acquisition toolkit webpage. It goes over kind of general procedures for acquisitions. We have a lot of required documents that it entails. So you're going to want to make sure you know everything that we're going to need from you. There's information about getting reimbursed for escrow if you're getting ready to close on your property. And then also there's information there about the waiver of retroactivity. And there's a checklist there of those documents that we require in order to be able to provide you a waiver. So yeah. Other requirements, cultural resource consultation is required. RCO is responsible if there's no other federal like permit or land ownership or state nexus, like if it's state-owned properties. And that outcome of that consultation with affected tribes and the Department of Archaeologic and Historic Preservation, that all depends on risk. There could be potential where they just say, hey, we're good with this, and you can proceed under an inadvertent discovery plan. They may require an archaeological monitoring of ground disturbance. So that could happen during geotech if you're doing that for a culvert project or a bridge. They may require a survey to be done prior to implementing. And then still that has to be reviewed and put through with the consultation, and then they may have further recommendations based on what's found in that survey. So you may have to modify it or mitigate for certain actions. So you want to make sure that you budget for this stuff. It is important to include, and it can be costly depending on the project areas and whether there are sensitive areas. All right. Planning projects. So these cover assessment type projects. So fish passage barrier inventories, reach scale habitat assessments, landowner willingness. working to develop innovative techniques that help implement restoration, or just feasibility and scoping studies for later implementation, as well as just design projects. So going to preliminary or final design. All of these kind of assessment projects should be necessary precursors to implementing restoration actions or those innovative techniques. So we want to see them result in projects essentially, as particularly if you're not having designs included with it as an element. All right. We do have required design deliverables, Manual 24, the WCRRI manual. In Appendix F has the criteria for that, which is basically for engineered restoration projects. It is based on conceptual, preliminary, and final descriptions. We don't go by the percentages because those could vary by engineer and also in relation with complexity of the project. So the manual has detailed requirements for these engineering documents and deliverables, and we're going to expect that you follow those with the projects. And let's see, anything else? Okay. So this is, just so you know, is the same as the Salmon Recovery Fund Board design requirements. So not reinventing the wheel there. All right, restoration projects. These are intended to improve natural habitat functionality or resiliency. If you're asking for 350,000 or more in restoration costs, then we require you to submit preliminary designs by the final application deadline. So that's June 6th. And again, you need to follow the design requirements in Appendix F. Any questions, Alice?
Doesn't look like it, and I just want to bring everybody's attention to the chat. If you haven't been looking at it, I have been putting in a bunch of helpful links as Alyssa's been going through her presentation, so you can get to those easily and not just have to look at them on the slides. But
All
I
right.
think you're good to go.
Cool. All right, so going through the application process, we've got a couple of new things in 2024. We've added a new attachment that's required, the Priority Habitat and Species Parcel Report. It's from DFW, Department of Fish and Wildlife's website. It basically, you can look up your project area and it'll spit out a report of important species and habitat types in the area. And we want you to incorporate the results of that into your problem statement and the proposal questions. Just include that in your narrative, because that's stuff that'll be looked at in your scoring. It is a required attachment. I'll talk a little bit more about it later when I get to those. We've modified the jobs question to report FTEs rather than just single jobs, because that can help incorporate part-time jobs and things like that. There is a link in there in the application to help guide you to like a wiki of how to determine FTEs. You can also Google stuff on that to find out how to figure out how many FTEs you have. We've adopted recent surfboard manual changes that were done in 2023. So upping that preliminary design requirement for restorations, it used to be 250,000, so we've upped it to 350. And then we've kind of changed the look and expanded more detail in the design criteria. So it looks different. There's a more clear deliverable table and when things are due for what phases of design. And then we've added kind of a catch-all other restoration metric in the application metrics for activities that don't otherwise fit in PRISM. So our metrics are kind of stuck and developed for salmon, and there's not a lot of ability to kind of really make them unique to certain programs. So this is kind of a good catch-all. if there's just no metrics in there to cover what you're doing and it's still eligible, an example would be, we've had some projects where they were doing prairie restoration, then this is a good metric for some of that. But yeah, if you're not sure, ask me and we can help work out which metrics to choose. So the general application process, you're going to want to contact the Coast Salmon Partnership to get a PRISM number. So you submit a conceptual project form to Rebecca Brooks. She will get you that information entered into the salmon recovery portal, and you'll get your PRISM number. And then you can go in there and search for your number and get your application started and submit those in PRISM Online. We do site visits with the technical review committee. They provide their comments, we share them with you, and then you can refine and finalize your application, get everything in there that you need to, and then submit that. And then the reviewers will score and rank your projects, and we will develop that rank list, and that's the investment plan we will submit for the capital budget request. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. This is an important page. You're going to want to bookmark it, save it. It's got all of the grant materials for the Washington Coast Restoration Resiliency Initiative program. It's got the grant schedule, forms needed, the manual. You're going to want to be very closely intact with the manual, learn it, know it, live it. So there's also application checklists there and reference documents. So you have lists to other relevant manuals in there as well. So yeah, that's a good page to go to. There's other forms in there that you need. All right, so the application review, once the apps come in, the grant manager reviews them. We review it for eligibility, make sure it's complete, it has everything we need. The technical review has a peer-reviewed ranking process. Those are used, they're evaluated using the criteria in Appendix A. So make sure you are very aware and understand what's in that evaluation criteria so that you can make sure you're catering your project to that. And they'll use the evaluation module in PRISM that we have in order to do that. And I think this year we're going to try to do a comment form through there. If not, if that doesn't work out, then we will basically do what we did last year, and they'll be submitted through a spreadsheet that you'll get back. So either way, you'll get your feedback. All right, so March 14th, draft application materials are due. So this is not a full application. We basically want you to go into the PRISM application online and fill out the project details page for page fields. There's proposal questions, metrics, and cost information that we want filled out. We'll ask for project maps, location, vicinity, site plan. If it's an acquisition, we'll want parcel maps. If you have designs, please upload them. If it's a barrier fish passage project, we want barrier evaluations and correction analysis forms. We're going to need photographs, at least 2 of them, and then a draft cost estimate. So the more you can provide here in your project, the better the reviewers will have going into these site visits, so that you don't get a ton of questions back. And make sure your project has as much information available for them to work with. So again, checklist available, Appendix B on the WCRRI website, Appendix B in the manual. So once we get those applications in after March 14th, we're going to start scheduling the site visits. Again, they'll be either on site or remote. And then this is an opportunity to have dialogue with the review team, get feedback there. And then they'll also provide written comments. And then June 6th is when the final application materials are due. You're going to want to finalize those draft ones, provide responses to the review comments, incorporate those into your application as necessary. We're going to also ask you for community support documentation. These are your letters of support. So make sure you get those, because those could be the difference of a few points that bump you up into a funded level. We require landowner acknowledgement forms at this time. Also, if you're a state or federal sponsor, we want project partnership contribution forms. If you are asking for the 350,000 or more, we're going to want those preliminary designs. Or if you've done previous design phases, we're going to want those as well, even if they're just conceptual. Again, the more information you have, the better. Applicant authorization form. Tribal applicants don't have to do this at application. We have a different process for when we go under agreement if a project's funded. But we do ask for the RCO fiscal data collection sheet. And new, again, is the priority habitat and species parcel report. And you're going to want to hit submit at this time. You don't have to before, especially if you don't have all the required attachments. But you certainly can at Draft App, and we have the ability to return applications for editing too. All right, so just some basics on Prism. I'm not going to do a demo today, but if you are new to this, you're going to have to get a Secure Access Washington account and then get a Prism account set up. And then again, you submit your conceptual project report form to Rebecca Brooks, and then she'll give you a Prism number to complete. There are some training videos available. If you click on this link, or if you search on Prism in the RCO website, on how to use it. If you're not sure, ask me as well. There are some browsers that work better for it. It doesn't use Internet Explorer anymore. We use Edge, Microsoft Edge here at the office, but these other types, Safari, Firefox, what's the other one? Google, do work well with Prism. So just a note for that. And then, so once you get into Prism Online, it's going to take you to this dashboard, the project actions dashboard. And you're not going to go in there and start a new application because that's already been done for you. You're just going to go to your project number. So you type in the number that Rebecca Brooks gave you and search for that. And then you can start entering it in. And basically, when you're in there, you're just going to start filling out all the fields and clicking next. You're going to want to make sure that you save often. Once you're in the application, it kind of takes you through all the pages one step at a time. It's like a wizard. And, you know, you can save your material and go back. But it'll give you errors if you're not filling out certain things. There are character limits, so be mindful of that, particularly if you're copying and pasting from something. Doesn't really handle formatting too great. And if you do have bullets and things like that in there, that's going to add to your character limits. So just kind of overall topic discussions on some of these pages. So there's work sites and properties. The way it's set up is that you have to have at least one work site. If you have work in separate or disjointed locations or counties, then you're going to want to do multiple work sites. For like large scale invasive species restoration projects, we're going to want you to put in a work site for each watershed, or ideally like lead entity area, as associated with salmon recovery projects. And then projects will need to bill by work site, and those metrics are filled out for each work site. And then under those work sites, you can enter a property. You're going to want to do that for each landowner. Again, for those large scale invasive species projects, we'll want a single property by landowner type or land use or other logical grouping. properties aren't required to be entered for those assessment or inventory projects. In some of those, you may not really know where you're actually going to be doing work. So we don't necessarily need the details for the landowner at that time. The worksite details page, again, that's kind of based off the salmon recovery funding projects. It does have a automated list of fish species which are intended to have project benefits. So if those are related, then you can list them. Otherwise, I recommend you can say like non-applicable and put other species in the second box in the text box. So, and then the project proposal page. So again, you're going to want to make sure you include these things in your problem statement. Your project description should include like location, habitat types, the priority species that's going to be benefiting from your project. You're going to include goals and your proposed actions, and those actions should correspond with the metrics. So make sure you're including SMART objectives. So specific, measurable, achievable, what's the R? Relevant and time bound. And then there will be supplemental questions for certain project types like restoration, acquisition, and stuff like that. So make sure you're filling all of those out as well. Again, to the metrics page, the metrics are sort of catered based on the project type that you've selected. So whether it's a restoration or an acquisition, make sure you read carefully the descriptions. Again, these are based off of salmon projects that we've report to NOAA, and but they should be completed for each work site. For the project plan, you're going to want to use a citation format, which is indicated, and then the top ones are kind of your overarching metric totals. And then you're going to select individual specific activities and work types below that apply. And these metrics have cost estimates associated with them, so they should line up to your grant plus any match that you might be providing, so those total costs. More on the metrics. So with design projects, it provides, conceptual, preliminary, and final designs. You're going to want to select the highest level of designs that you're going to want to achieve. It's implied that the lower levels are going to be met if you're going to final per se. Then, the way our design criteria is set up is that you have to have the deliverables for the conceptual and the preliminary as well. But we only need the highest level selected in the metric that you're going to achieve in the scope. For barrier projects, if there's a downstream barrier, then you're going to want to report 0 miles gained. Make sure you're as accurate as possible with these metrics. You don't want to overcommit or double count. These are used. All of these WCRRI projects are also tracked in the salmon recovery portal, and they do use this data. So it is important. It's good to help justify our work and the things that we're getting done with our funding. Also helps justify to the legislature to ask for more money. Just a note on indirect. There's only one spot where you can indicate that you want indirect as a metric, and that's in worksite 1 only. So you can't put indirect for any other multiple work sites. But if you do get funded, you can bill indirect to any of the work sites. It's just, it only asks for one metric in one work site for the application. So that's all I have on that. All right. And then going into the restoration cost estimates or the cost estimates page, it'll say acquisition or planning, if those are the project types that you're working with. So these are basically just a roll up of all the costs that you entered into the metrics page. So they should be the total cost, grant plus any match that you're asking or providing. These round costs to the nearest dollar. and they should align with the cost estimate attachment. And again, they should also align with what's in the restoration metrics or the metrics pages, because it's pulling that data. And if something's not lining up, then it'll give you errors. Match. So match is on a separate page now. It's on the cost summary page. So if you are bringing match and you're ready to bill it, if you get funded, then this is where the match is going to be designated. So if you need to add sources, you can click the button to add match. Use the drop-down list and you can select the category, type, and funding organization. And then make sure those totals, again, correlate to your cost estimates. It'll run the math for you and make sure that you're doing it. But it also should align with your separate attached cost estimate. And then you just enter in the amount for each type. But again, I would caution to only add match if you have it ready and it's kind of a done sure deal. Don't be overzealous in your wishful thinking that you're going to get match, because again, it's not required. You can get some points for it, but it's better to not add it if there's no chance of getting any by the time you get funded and go under agreement. All right, cultural resources. There's a whole page for this. So you're gonna need to map your work site areas, and you can do multiple ones. It's gonna ask for one for each work site, but you can also do separate ones. You could do one for the actual project footprint, and you can do one for staging areas or for road access things that might have impact. So you're going to make sure that you clearly map those areas and provide detailed information about the extent of the ground disturbing work or other planned work. There's a mapping tutorial linked directly in the application that you can review that Alice did. Lovely. But I'll just kind of go over quick screenshots of it. So in order to map, you're going to do a full screen map. Click that button and it'll open it up, and then you can either draw with polygons or circles, or you can upload shape files if you have those available for your project site. And you can use different base maps. You can do topo or imagery. And then it's going to ask you to make titles for each of those sites. And again, be more detailed as much as you can as possible, because our archaeologists are going to review this stuff, and based on the information that you're providing, they're going to help determine a pathway, and that leads to what kind of cultural resource conditions that you're going to be given if you're funded, and then essentially kind of what will need to be done in order to satisfy that. So if you know you're going to need an Army Corps permit, or you have one in hand, then great, put that in there. The more you can provide, the better.
Alyssa, can I interrupt that and add one more tip for mapping?
Yeah.
Cultural resources areas. If your project footprint covers different land ownership types, then we'll want different polygons. So let's say you have a large footprint and you have private landowners and DNR property on that your project covers. We'll want those private land ownerships and those public land ownerships with different polygons, because that helps our cultural resources team understand that we might have two different lead agencies for cultural resources review. DNR will do theirs, and then RCO might likely do the private land ownership.
Correct. Yes. So it's better to have all this detail up front rather than having to fix it later, essentially. All right. Okay, now I'm getting into required attachments. So we do ask for a cost estimate. We do have a template for that. No need to reinvent the wheel. You can use it. It's not required, but it's helpful. And it has tabs for each type of project. So there's a tab for acquisition, design projects, restoration. If you're doing a combo, you can still have it total up under the final sheet, so you can put your design costs in the one tab and then the restoration in the other, or acquisition and restoration. But main tips for this is to not cut yourself short. Make sure you're covering all your costs that you need. They should align with what's in Prism. And if you should have contingency rolled into each cost category or each, line item, rather than having it a separate line item. So, we've seen a ton of inflation and costs are getting crazy. So make sure you're covering what you need. And also having a good detailed budget is going to help with the review. It can help determine kind of readiness to proceed, and that what costs you need in order to do your project. So they should be detailed and as accurate as possible. Another required attachment are landowner acknowledgement forms. These, we need one for each landowner. So this is for non-sponsor owned property. It basically is non-binding. It just states that the landowner is aware that you as a sponsor are applying for funding to implement a project on the property. So if you're applying for an assessment or inventory, you don't have to submit those at application because you don't have a set landowner on board yet. Reach scale acquisitions, if you're doing multiple parcels within a reach, we're going to want at least the landowner acknowledgement for the top priority parcels that you plan to target first, and then more can be added later. Authorization form, this is a template that we have for RCO. It basically states who's able to sign and apply for agreements from your organization, from the governing board. They're aware of the project application. It's got resolution language in there. You could pass your own resolution if your organization requires that. And then you can have multiple projects on there. So if you're doing one for surfboard projects this year, and then you've got some Wickery too, you can put them all in the same form. And again, we're not requiring this ad application for tribal sponsors. They send resolutions in for a signed funded agreement. So we have a little bit different process with that because we have a tribal agreement that requires some different things. All right, here's the new attachments, the Priority Habitat and Species Parcel Report. So the link is here on the web. You basically open it up. You can zoom into your project area. You're going to want to mark a polygon, a point, or a parcel. And then you basically can just click Generate Report, and it'll pop it up. And so you can either print and scan it. The report itself, when it spits it out, is basically just kind of meant to print. And I know I myself don't like printing. I don't want paper. So there is an option in your web browser. Hopefully some may allow you to save the document as another form that you can save on your files somewhere and then attach it. Or you can hit the menu buttons. The 3 dots usually kind of has other options under your browser. Like this screenshot shows a web capture option. You can click on that and it'll save the document as another type of file, and you can then upload that. So it's pretty easy. This one in the example was done for the Quinault River, and it spit out riverine and habitat, and it also included Roosevelt elk and marbled murrelet. And so that's the kind of stuff we want you to add into your project proposal, problem statement, narrative. All right, so when you're ready to submit your final application, you're going to want to make sure that all the application pages are filled out and all the data is aligning. It's not giving you errors. So if you look here, you're going to want to do a final check application for errors check, and then Anything that shows up with the red exclamation has a problem on it. So you're going to want to go to that page and it'll say at the top what the problem is, and then you're going to want to fix that. If you're not clear what the heck Prism is trying to tell you, call me and I can help you. Because you're going to need those all cleared up and good to go before it'll let you submit. So then once those errors are all gone, you have all green checks on those pages, then you can click certify and then submit the application. All right. Any questions?
Actually, we did have a few questions that I thought were pretty good. So going back to design,
Yeah.
we had a question that asks if there is a category for design build. And so, yes, we still have that option, but we're calling it field fit to kind of better reflect that sometimes we get a higher level design and then there's some adjustment that's done while it's being implemented. But I didn't write this in the chat, we do still have the $350,000 limit for preliminary designs. So if you're asking for 350 or more in grant, there's still a requirement that those designs have to be submitted with your final application.
Yeah, and the field fit doesn't get you out of, you still have to go to a preliminary level.
Right.
And depending on the complexity of the project, if it's a road decommission, maybe even like BDAs, like Beaver Dam analogs, there may be kind of standardized design documents you can use for that can be submitted. But yeah, you still have to at least do the preliminary level.
And Alyssa, there's a question in the application, right, that asks what level of design?
Mm-hmm.
And that
you
includes
plan
a
to
field
achieve.
fit option, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it'll ask you to fill out some more detail of like, why you're not going to a final level or so.
Yeah. And I think you get an opportunity to say what design documents you intend to create. And so we can provide the reviewers can provide feedback on if they think that's appropriate or not.
Yes. Other questions?
Yeah, one more that's related. Another question about field fit, and it was what do you select for project type if you have planning and restoration? And so it's kind of it depends is the answer. If your design costs can fit with your other A&E costs and you're still under the 30% limit for your restoration costs, and you would have a restoration project. Make sure, like Alyssa said, you clearly itemize your costs in your A&E so we understand how much you have budgeted for design versus your other administrative costs. And if you exceed that limit, then talk to Alyssa and we have access to creating a combination project. So you'd have planning and restoration metrics in your application. And so your planning costs would be separate from your restoration costs. It's really, I mean, RCO only RCO can select a combination project. So you might have like a planning and acquisition project. So it's important to talk to Alyssa to do that. And so she can walk you through to like how the costs and the metrics are broken out, because it's a little bit more complicated in the application. So we want to make sure that you're set up for success.
Yeah. And it might actually be more of a straightforward combo if you're doing designs on one work site and then you're actually doing restoration on a totally different site. So yeah, we can discuss it and work out the best way to get it filled out.
Yeah, great point. Oh, we have one that just came in.
Okay.
So let's do it live. What is needed for the March preliminary application For a construction project, your final cost estimates and preliminary designs need to be complete at preliminary or final? And I'm guessing you mean early application or final, draft application or final application. So first, what's needed at the March draft application?
Well, so that is, I had a slide for that. That is basically the project details, project metrics, costs filled out in the online details application forms. If you have designs, great. But if you don't have them quite yet, the drop dead deadline, especially if we're requiring designs, like preliminary designs, because you're asking for the 350,000 or more at for a restoration project, then we're going to want that stuff by final app. If you don't have it for the draft, that's fine, but maybe make it clear that it's coming, because again, you're going to get potentially more questions from the reviewers if you don't have those details. But yeah, for any required documents, those checklists in Appendix B have what we need in there.
Yeah.
And also the application itself has the attachments page will show you which documents are required. So yeah.
And I just put the link to the draft application checklist in the chat again. So
Yeah.
use that. That's a really helpful guide to remind you of what is absolutely necessary in March. And then there's a final one as well that rolls everything up.
Those are also linked separate documents. There's a draft checklist and a final application checklist on the web page on the right-hand menu. Also, if you just want to pull up the actual checklist standalone, then that's there as well.
Yep, and I'm dropping those in the chat. So if you want to download them now while you're thinking about it, it's perfect time.
Yeah. All right. So anything else?
It looks like that's it for now.
Okay, cool. So just kind of overarching tips for the application is to make sure that you're thorough. Don't assume that everybody that's reviewing your application is familiar with your project area, the problems, and the work that you're trying to do, and why it's important. So the more you can connect that information and make it clear for them, the better off you're going to score. And again, the less questions and concerns they're going to have about your project. Meet the evaluation criteria, make sure you're catering to that and answering those things that they're looking for. You're going to want to connect the problem with your solution. Again, the checklists, we have those available in Manual 24 in Appendix B. And then again, they're also just single documents on the WCRRI website. Save your application often. Start early, finish early if you can. I know a lot of times folks wait to the last minute, and if you start getting all these prism errors that you can't figure out how to fix, then people get in panic mode, especially the day it's due. So try to get things done early. Ask for help. I'm here to help you. And then if you're having technical difficulties with Prism, then we have the help desk. You can email Prism support and they can help you with some of that stuff. Okay, last part is I'm just going to go over some important things that are necessary for funded projects. These can be things that you'll want to keep in mind for your application too, because that'll be things that'll apply to you if you get funded. So for project implementation, in order to get under agreement, we're going to need a landowner certification form, and these are for restoration projects. This is basically a form that says you either did title review or you talked with the landowners to ensure that there's no encumbrances or anything on the property that's going to prevent the project from happening. So that's what that is. For acquisition projects, we ask for a preliminary title report before we can go under agreement. So, again, before you begin work, before you begin construction, you're gonna wanna make sure you have an agreement signed and in place. Also, that you have site control. So you have to have a landowner agreement in place in order to start construction. You have to have your cultural resource consultation and review completed. Gonna need all your permits, and for acquisitions, you're gonna have to have all your required due diligence done, appraisals, appraisal reviews, site hazard assessments, things like that. So, and if you need approval for pre-agreement costs, then you're gonna wanna make sure you get those from your grant manager as well. All right, if you're working on Department of Natural Resources, state-owned aquatic lands, for in-water projects, you're gonna wanna consult with the aquatic land manager. And they're gonna help you determine if your project is on state-owned aquatic lands, and if that's the case, then they are the ones that are going to need to sign your landowner acknowledgement forms. And you're gonna need legal authorization to do that. So they do lease agreements that will basically be the landowner agreement for DNR properties. If your project's going to be on WDFW's, Department of Fish and Wildlife's managed lands, then those landowner forms must be signed by them. Their state lands division manager. And again, you're going to need to have those approvals, landowner agreements, or access permits available and in Prism attached before you start work. And also, if it's on their property, then they'll be the lead for cultural resources review and compliance. Getting paid, just so you're aware, we are reimbursement-based payments. So you have to pay the costs before we can pay you. So keep that in mind. That could be an issue for some folks. We do have a billing module in Prism that you'll be submitting bills through if you're funded. And we do have the ability to provide advances, which is kind of a cool thing. A lot of the WCRRI folks take advantage of it. Requires an advance agreement and certain restrictions that are described in Manual 8, which is our reimbursement manual. So that there's a website that has more information about billing there. So make sure your finance folks or your billing folks, if they're not you, are aware of this stuff. And then general grant administration requirements. So we require progress reports every 6 months. Those will be put in as milestones and be required for submittal in Prism. We can allow amendments. There's a process described in Manual 24. We use the same amendment request form as the Salmon Recovery Fund Board. And then for acquisition or sponsor-owned property, we require stewardship plans, and we do have templates available. Those are on our WCRRI webpage as well. Non-sponsor-owned property, we require those landowner agreements. We enter milestones for, basically work schedule and certain things like when you're going to start restoration or start collecting data, obtaining your permits, things like that. And then we'll also have milestones in there for your design deliverables or other documents that we're going to require as part of the scope of work. And then at the end, there's a final report module in there that will need to be submitted and approved before we can pay out your final costs. And then just to be aware, we have long-term obligations that I've mentioned before. Manual 7 has all those details. This was something that was added last round. It was adopted from RCO's carbon credit policy, and we put it into the WCRRI manual. It's basically if there's a funded acquisition that was funded by WCRRI, we can allow folks to enter into carbon credits. There's a policy in Manual 3. It's parcel specific, and we have a form and stuff that needs to be filled out and approved by RCO. And it basically, if you're planning on enrolling in that program, it can't subordinate RCO's deed of right or assignment of rights, or conflict or interfere with our funding purpose and the ability for us to enforce those terms of our project agreement and those long-term obligations. And then it can't reduce or diminish RCO's ability to pursue a remedy in the event of non-compliance or conversion. And then it also cannot conflict with RCO's project income policy. So just an FYI for that. I don't know how popular that would be. I've only had one sponsor want to get involved with that so far, but who knows? Maybe it'll become more of a thing. All right, we're at the end of the road. If you have questions, contact me. Ned Pittman is also available. He's the program director for the Coast Salmon Partnership. So there's our contact information. And yeah, I'm happy to help develop your applications, work through any PRISM issues you have, eligibility questions, whatnot. So don't hesitate to reach out. And that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Got a couple more questions for you, Alyssa.
Okay, cool.
First is about the presentation itself. Will it be posted?
Yeah, we could post it. And we'll also have the recording too. We'll make sure we do that.
And I just saw one that I missed, so we're going to do it live. The question is, are landowner forms required for planning projects or just construction? And so that's there. We have 3 different landowner forms. One is a landowner acknowledgement form, and that is for all projects due by final application. And then we have a landownership certification form. And that is for all projects due before the agreement is signed. So it's only necessary if you have funding. And then the third is the landowner agreement form, which is the agreement between the sponsor organization and the landowner describing the work that will be performed and the long-term maintenance and those kinds of things. And that is due if you have an active restoration project. It must be signed and submitted to RCO prior to starting construction. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and there's more details on those in the manual. I know it's confusing, but.
So right now, only the landowner acknowledgement form at this point in time for application requirements.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that actually covered 2 questions because I went through all 3. One thing I remembered that I wanted to mention, and now I've forgotten again. Oh, combination projects. If you're filling out your application and it's a restoration project or an acquisition project, and then you realize like midway through that you might want to change it to a combination project, if you talk to Alyssa and you decide, and you all decide that's the right pathway, you won't lose any of your work in your application. So don't be worried if you're unsure when you get started and if you start working on your application. Changing the project type won't lose the work you've done. Oh, we've got another one, another question. The authorization form.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe more detail who the governing body is?
It depends on your organization. Some folks have a commission that they work with, and they may require them to approve kind of resolution language sometimes. So the form itself, if you're a non-tribal sponsor, has terms in it that are essentially a resolution, but some organizations may have extra resolution language that they want to add to that. So it really depends on your organization. Maybe you need a board authorization. You may have your own kind of signature authority designation with your agency, and so maybe your president has to sign the agreements. Then you put them on there. it just really depends on how your organization's set up with your governance documents and who has authority to do what. So some agents or organizations may allow their project managers to sign agreements, so then their name will be on there. So it's really kind of dependent on how your board, commission, governing bodies set things up with you. They may want somebody higher up the chain doing things or not. So that's kind of what that form is for, is to say who's allowed to sign agreements and apply for projects, who's allowed to sign amendments for your organization. So that's what that document does. We just want to make sure that the right people are able and are allowed to sign documents, and it's really kind of legal purposes. You know, there's some things that I have to go to my director for a decision on. I can't do that, or my boss might have to. So it's kind of the same thing.
That's all that's in the chat right now.
Okay. All right, well, I guess if there's nothing else, we can adjourn. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
And don't hesitate to reach out if you need help.
Good luck on your applications.
Yep. Cool. All right.